Hey guys, so this is a bit of an insight into the sort of things we do over on Patreon. March 2022 was white space / negative space theme of the month, and this was one of my favorite sketch demos from the month, so I wanted to share that with you here as well. So please do check out my Patreon page. We do a different theme of the month each month, and I provide weekly demonstrations. You can ask me absolutely anything, as well as suggest themes, reference photos, techniques, or materials that you would like me to dive deeper into. We sort of learn and experiment together. It's really fun, and it costs about the same as like 2 or 3 coffees a month, so it's a bargain. Unusually for me, I started with a thumbnail for this sketch, although it wasn't very thumbnail-y. It was like actually the same size as my actual sketch, but I wasn't too comfortable with this particular style, so I wanted to have a bit of a plan as to what I was aiming for. These cheap school exercise books with plain paper are absolutely perfect for these kind of working outs or rough sketches, and I also write loads of notes in mine as well when I come up with some ideas, so it's just nice to have a nice big A4 blank page to work on. So once I felt like I had a plan, I moved over to my actual sketchbook. This is a Stillman Birn Epsilon hardback sketchbook. I think it's the 5.5 by 8.5 inch size. It has smooth white paper and it's 150 GSM. I wasn't really expecting the paper to be that great for watercolor, to be honest. I hadn't tried the Epsilon series of Stillman Birn sketchbooks before, so that's why I bought it. I'm trying to get to try them all out over time. And I tentatively started to use watercolor in this book towards the start of the book. And surprisingly, it actually works really nicely, especially for ink and watercolor sketches like this, where you're not doing too much heavy layering of watercolor or wet and wet. So I wasn't sure about this sketchbook at first, but now I really love it. And I'd definitely buy another one, maybe a bigger one, and maybe the soft cover option. By the way, guys, if you want a rundown of the different Stillman Birn sketchbooks that are available, then you can check out my post over on urbansketchingworld.com with a description of each of the series and my thoughts on each book. And I'll leave the link in the description below if you're interested in that. I am for sure a big fan of Stillman Birn sketchbooks. So back to this sketch. I'm sort of doing the big shapes in pencil, and for this I am using a 2B pencil. Nope, sorry, I'm using a B pencil, and it's nice because it's soft enough to sort of be rubbed out after you've kind of added your ink lines, but if a bit of it's left behind, it doesn't really, the watercolor doesn't react with it too much or anything, so I quite like sketching in a B pencil. I feel like that's kind of the sweet spot for me. So I'm trying to not get too fiddly with the details in the pencil, although I feel like I'm starting to do that by the end of the pencil stage. I'm trying to have to hold myself back. I think it's just because I get excited about drawing. So then I start drawing everything and I'm like, oh, no, don't need to draw that all in pencil. It's mainly just to get the big shapes in and just make sure everything fits on the page and all that kind of stuff. So that's the pencil stage, and then I move over onto the ink stage, and here I'm just using a Uniball fine liner, probably a 0.2 or 0.3, and I basically just start from the top left and work my sort of way through, just drawing in more of the details. Because I've got those pencil lines in, I know where everything goes roughly, so I can just go to town with drawing in all the details and working my way through the sketch. So the emphasis in the sketch really is to deal with the negative space and the white space. So this will become more obvious as the sketch progresses and certainly as the colour goes on. But basically the idea is that I'm leaving the 2 houses or the walls on the side of the page, so on the left side and on the right side, and they're going to be left blank. They're not going to be painted and they're not going to have any detail in them. And then basically the staircase from the bottom of the page leads right into the middle of the sketch, and everything in the middle is going to be painted and in colour. So it just really leads your eye through the page and you just kind of want to walk around the corner and see what's there. So that's the idea I'm going for. This was inspired by a variety of sources on, Pinterest, seeing other sketchers work, that kind of thing. As I said, this is the kind of stuff that we look at on Patreon. We sort of look at a topic and we look at other sketchers and we see what they do, and then we try it out for ourselves with a reference photo that I either have or find on, Pinterest or Unsplash or whatever like that. And then we apply it to that reference photo. So I haven't found anything that's exactly like what I'm doing here, but I've kind of taken some ideas from a variety of sources and then kind of applied my own ideas about it. But I really encourage all of my Patreons to take the reference photo. I give them the reference photo, take it and have a go at it, or find your own reference photo and apply the same kind of technique. So this is just one of the week's demos. And as you will see as we go forward, it's actually really quite dramatic. It's quite effective. So again, if you guys want to have a go at this, then find a photo that works. It took me a little while to find a photo that works because you've got to have like the right kind of scene, I think, where you've got two distinct shapes that you can leave blank on either side. And then you can kind of do all the details in the middle and it leads you through. So maybe something like a street or something where you can leave the buildings on either side of the street blank and then the road leads down and maybe there's something at the end of the road that you can see, which would all be in colour. So use your own judgment. But yeah, there's loads of sites out there that you can try and find a nice photo on, like Unsplash, Pexels, Pexels. Your own photographs, Pinterest, obviously, maybe even Instagram. So yeah, have a look around. I like to keep a library. So anytime I find a photograph that I like, that I might like to sketch from, just for practicing purposes, I either pin it to a Pinterest board called Sketching Reference. I'll leave the link to that in the video description below. You are more than welcome to go and use the photographs there. I also just collect my own photographs, like on my phone and stuff like that. I create a little folder in my Photos app of sketching references that I want to try out. So it's really nice to build a little library for yourself, because when you do feel like you want to sit down and sketch, you don't have to start hunting around for subject matter. You can just go to your little library or collection of photos and pick something and start sketching. So that's quite nice. So now we are moving on to the watercolor stage. And I am using my usual St. Petersburg White Night watercolor set that I've had for a few years now. I keep just replacing the pans when they run out. I really love these paints, as probably most of you already know. And so, yeah, I'm just using my Escoda Reserva travel brush. You by no means need this brush. I'm just telling you what I'm using. I think it's the size number 6, which I don't really use that much, but I think for this size of sketchbook and the size of the actual sketch on it and the areas that I needed to paint in, I think this size 6 is actually a really nice size. I do have the number 10 and the number 2 as well, and I can hands down say I mostly use the number 10 and I basically never use the number 2. For a small brush that can do details really nicely, I use the Rosemary Co travel dagger brush. I think it's a 1/4 inch travel dagger brush. Which is just awesome because it's got a nice point on it for details, but you can also cover slightly larger areas with it too. So I highly recommend that brush. The link is in the description below. If it's not written in the actual description below, it's in the heading art supplies, and then it will take you to my recommended stuff page. And that's just got like all of the stuff I like on it. So yeah, I'm just painting in this scene. I've kind of obviously got a lot of browns and greys going on because that's pretty much the literal colours that are in the scene. So I am aware of that, and I know that I do need to make sure it doesn't end up looking very flat, because then that kind of takes away from the whole idea of the concept of the scene, where I really want to draw the viewer's eye up the steps and like just make them need to walk around that corner and see what's there. So yeah, I'm trying to keep my eye on that. But when you're putting in your base layers and your first colours and stuff like that, it is going to look a bit flat to start with. And then it's when you go in and do your extra bits, your shadows, and, maybe if you've got like a way to put like an opaque white on, a bit of highlights here and there, that kind of thing, or little pops of colour. So you have to stay a bit relaxed in the first pass of your sketch, because it's not going to look that great to start with. But yeah, the magic really comes when you go back in and add add some contrasts and shadows and that kind of thing. I'm also just trying to work out what I am doing here, because I wasn't sure whether I should put in this grassy verge on the left and the plants and stuff. I was like, am I taking away from the idea of the sketch? But on reflection, I think it was the right move, because I think it would have been just too blank otherwise. So I think it does make the scene a bit more inviting. So with this kind of technique or this idea, it really is a question of what do you draw and what do you not draw? And that's the idea: white space, negative space. What do you draw? What do you leave out? What's going to give the most impact? So again, here I went in to paint the sky because of the negative space on the right and the left. It definitely needed a sky painted in, otherwise it would have not made too much sense, I don't think. So this is the Rosemary Co travel dagger brush that I was talking about, the one with the silver handle. Absolutely fantastic brush. I think it's basically one of my favourite brushes. And it's not too expensive either. It's a blend between synthetic and natural hairs, I believe. So I think it cost me about £11. Don't quote me on that. Prices are fluctuating greatly at the moment, but I think it was about £11. And so what, that's probably like, I don't know, plus minus $15, something like that, which I think is pretty reasonable for a handmade brush from the UK. I actually am a really big fan of Rosemary Co. I believe you can get their brushes in the US through the company Art Toolkit. I'm pretty sure they carry a range, but I think you can probably just order them from Rosemary Co. directly as well. Again, I've got too many good things to say about Rosemary Co. So do go and check out their website and see if anything appeals to you there. I know Liz Steele is also a big fan. So I have switched back to my fine liner here. I guess I'm just going to leave some of the watercolor areas, especially those bushes and stuff, just to dry a bit. And sometimes, you paint a bit and then you're like, okay. And then you feel like you just want to add some more ink details. And then you might swing back to the paint again. Just do what you feel right. There's no like, this stage, then this stage, then this stage. You can swing back and forward between using your pens and your watercolors. There's no hard and fast rules. Also, you miss things as well. Like sometimes I'll sketch things and then I would have completely missed putting in a certain element in the sketch. So I think adding things like little textural details is also really important in this scene. I think because we are leaving an entire section blank, like on the left and the right, that actually the more you can put into the bits that are detailed, i.e. all of that section in the middle that's coloured, the better. It's going to make the juxtaposition of the coloured detailed bit more pronounced because of the parts that are just lacking any detail at all. So really go for it, put in all the details, all the textures, all the contrast, and it will just end up looking really cool. So notice how I'm turning the sketchbook around as I need to, depending on what is the most comfortable angle for me to draw lines. Don't be afraid to turn your page to make sure you're drawing a line at the most comfortable angle for you. So now I'm just going in with a black brush pen just to really pump up some areas where I think it needs some really harsh black. I think from memory, I really sort of debated whether to do the windows black or not, but I think that was the right decision. I think it's given it like a nice bit of impact. And just right at the end, I'm using a red Posca pen just to add a few dots into the foliage. It wasn't necessarily there in the photo reference, but I just felt like it needed a bit of a pop of colour. So don't be afraid to do that when you're sketching. You can take liberties. That's what's called artistic license. So go for it. Go to town. You don't even need to use realistic colours here. You could use crazy colours. This last month, May, we've been looking at a theme of the month called Sketching with Freedom, and some of that has been how to use colours that aren't there, like using crazy, bold, bright colours instead of the literal colours in the scene. So basically, it's art. Do what you want. And I do have my old favourites, the Faber Castell Pitt artist pens as well. They're sort of popping out to get involved in areas of this. Again, absolutely love those pens to add little shadows on top of the watercolour. They just work so well. If you want more on that, check out my video, My Secret Weapons to Adding Contrast. And I talk more about those pens in that video. And right at the end, I'm just adding a few bits of watercolor pencil, just to see if I can add a bit of variation in some of these bricks and just give a bit more texture and a bit more interest. And always looking to see where I can add dark bits, just to add as much contrast as possible. That's my personal preference. I just think it makes everything look really good if it's super contrasty, and it just makes everything pop. And make sure to keep an eye on your ink lines as well, like put in thicker lines where you want elements to pop forward. In a scene like this, I think trying to get the edges of the buildings where they overlap and stuff, getting nice thick lines on those really helps to identify where one house starts and another one ends. And then right at the end here, I'm just adding in some hatching into the steps in the shadow area. I think this is a side effect of taking a lot of Ian Fennelly classes. Just got to get a bit of light hatching in some of the areas just to add a bit of texture. But yeah, otherwise, guys, that's pretty much it. And as you can see, it's a really cool effect. I'm really happy with this sketch. I think it's really fun to look at. It's really interesting. And yeah, just have a go at this. See what you can do with using white space / negative space. So I hope this video has been really interesting, guys, and it's given you a little idea of something you can try out for yourself. Find a good reference photo, or even better, get out on location and have a go at this. And yeah, just have loads of fun. I hope you've enjoyed this one, and I'll see you in the next video.